Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords. And today, as you can see, I've got the hardcover and the soft cover of Baptism of Fire. These are basically the same book, except one is hardcover. And I'm gonna do this. There we go, so that we can page through this one. So today I just realized, as I was filming this, though it's probably not going to go out on this day, but at the time I'm filming this, it is Halloween, and I think what more appropriate moment to talk about the monsters of Baptism of Fire than on Halloween, right? So let's see where we get to those. We have reviewed a number of different things here. As you can see, we're quite a ways into the book now. At least we're basically past most of the rules of the book. All right, so the monsters of Baptism of Fire are, in a way, somewhat similar to what you see in, like, the Lion and Dragon stuff, or the Sword and Caravan stuff, where they are based on myth and legend. Of course, the myth and legend in the Slavic countries creates a different list of monsters than those in Western Europe and England, or than they do in the Silk Road in Asia. So, but the format is the same, right? And you're going to be, if you played any of my other games, you're going to recognize these, right? So we start out with the animals. There's a lot of similar animals here. There are a few additional ones that don't appear in Lion and Dragon, say. I don't remember if there was a lynx. I think there was a lynx in Lion and Dragon. What there wasn't is a giant mouse. This isn't just another version of the giant rat, because there's also giant rats in Poland. But this giant mouse, it dates to a famous legend about the last king of the first Poland's dynasty of chiefs, the Popolids. Who he was a very, very evil ruler. He ends up marrying a witch, and worse, a German. That's even worse than being a witch. And they commit all kinds of terrible evils together. They end up murdering his entire family so that nobody could try to overthrow him and replace him with another heir. And then at the end, the people rise up against him, and he flees to his tower that's next to this lake. And in the night, thousands of giant mice climb up the tower, devour Popiel and his wife, and the tower is abandoned, right? And so, like, this is the legend that they caused the death of Popiel and Brunhilde. So and then you got some giant spiders there, giant toads, right? These are not giant creatures. They're actually historical creatures. There you have the Tur and the Weisund, or Zuber. The Tur is also called the Auroch. The Auroch is basically the wild cow. It is extinct now, but up until some point in the Middle Ages, the debate varies somewhere between the 11th to maybe as late as the 15th century, there were still Auroch. Right, they're not just cows. They're like the ancestor cows. They're like what wolves were to dogs, right? And very interesting creatures. And then the Weisund is it's the European bison, right? Which some people are surprised, especially non-Europeans. But even some Europeans are surprised to know that there are bisons in Europe. And there are still some bisons in Europe, actually. So the bison was never fully extinct. It still exists, I believe. It was near extinction, but I think that there's been an effort to revive it. So the Weisund is a European bison. The European version of the bison. They are very different from the North American ones, but both of those have to be included because, like, in this time period, you can still find them around forests. So then we get to demonic creatures. And so we've got here Bieda. Bieda is an evil, supernatural, it's a demonic entity that has a really unusual characteristic to her, which is that She doesn't, like, as a rule, like, she doesn't attack you, right? What she does is she will curse you, and the curse will usually be something that is a kind of pseudo possession. And I don't want to get into too much detail about it, so people aren't, so players are not spoiled for it. But basically, it's a real, crossing paths with Viela is a very dangerous thing because it'll mess up your life in complicated ways. It's trickier than your average curse. Next, we have this little happy fellow here called the Puddle Man, or the Blotnik. He's a man made out of black mud, and he likes to drown people. There are a lot. I mean, Poland has a lot of rivers, and rivers are very important to Poland, right? And so there are a lot of terrifying monsters that live in or around rivers in Polish lore. Next, we got this guy, Boruta. This guy's really fascinating because there's lots and lots of stories about him. So Boruta's a demon, but he's a demon that somehow ended up in the material world. And Boruta, he lives in the forest, in the specific region, right? Like there's some swamplands around the Bzura River in the Masovian region, right? And he styles himself a noble. In fact, there's even the clan that he belongs to is like a real Polish clan, right? But it said that he took that clan styling, that house styling of the Polish nobility, because the first mortal that bound himself to him was, except when he arrived, was a member of that noble house, right? And so he kills commoners on sight. He's a really snooty demon, right? He kills commoners on sight, but unless they're accompanied by aristocrats. But with aristocrats, he could actually be downright, genteel, diplomatic, and helpful. And with his goal being, not so much Christians, right? Because he hates Christianity, obviously. But he can be kind of, he'll be very, very friendly, or attempt to be friendly with pagan aristocrats. And he might be friendly with Christian aristocrats if he thinks he can corrupt them. His goal is to get to get pagan nobles and possibly some Christian nobles to bind themselves to him, right? To make pacts with him in exchange for material power and influence and all these things, which he's very good at giving people, right? Like he can make people get really powerful friends in high places and things like that, right? He advances their career in exchange for them having to help him to destabilize Christianity in Poland, right? He's basically there in a one-man war against the Christianization of Poland. He's a demon marquis, and he's a very dangerous fellow, but interesting for a demon for sure. You got the Strizga, which are demons that possess the bodies of women who engaged in witchcraft, wishing for power, revenge, or immortality. They look like deformed crones, right? This is the crone archetype. And they drink the blood of humans and animals sometimes. They can shapeshift into big owls. They can regenerate after being slain. So it's a kind of a vampire aspect, but it's in this case, it's a demonic entity. Next, we have dragons. So, like in almost all medieval stories, dragons in Poland, by the time we get to the time of the Piast, are creatures that are seen as, they're definitely real, but nobody's seen one in a really long time, right? They're very rare at this point, right? And in the old days, in the Golden Age, there were more dragons. Though why that would make it the Golden Age, who knows? Because dragons are, in Europe at least, are generally very hostile, right? But anyways, they were over time gradually killed. Nevertheless, there are still dragons in the setting, because you could, if you go around the mountains, the Carpathians, the Tatras, that sort of area, there is a chance you will run into a small or large dragon. The stats here are basically quite similar to those of Lion and Dragon. As you see, elves, like in the sense of the classic high elves sort of thing, I don't even bother putting an entry for. You can have them, like they're because there are so many different types of fairies, and certainly some fairies have that aristocratic sort of style. But like the classic pointy-eared elf, is not something that is like as common in Polish lore, right? Instead, we get stuff like this guy. Okay, that's the Miezi, who is a nature spirit that will manifest into something that looks like part wild animal, part tree, right? And he can tell the appearance of each Miezi might be very different from each other. So this is not like the standard. This is just one example. And they are quite aggressive and violent, and they're quite powerful, and you want to watch out for them in the forest. They're not friendly. And there's the Borok, who are a type of fairy giant, and the Borok are mostly from Pomerania, and they are aggressive to human adults that enter their woods. But if a human child is lost in the woods, they will tend to be kind to them. They'll instead take the form, instead of a giant, they'll take the form of a funny-looking little dwarf, covered from head to toe in long gray hair, and they will help the child find the way out of the woods. But if it's an adult, if it's a human adult, then they are giant-sized and brutally violent. So that's basically how it goes. They have Virginia, which are river fairies, nature spirits that can be found in any river. These are the harmless fairies, right? These are not the drowny ones, right? And then we have Nomi, right? So some of you might know that many years ago I wrote an RPG, a party game RPG that was meant to be kind of a parody of like the pretentiousness of Forge Theory. It was published by Presses Intermedia. They have the rights to it now, and I think they're still selling it. It's called No Murdered, right? And I made it kind of my shtick that I had a visceral hatred of the gnome, right? And I always did as a DM. I never liked people playing gnomes. I didn't like the idea of gnomes as a player character, and over time my hatred of gnomes grew. But I never knew why, right? Because remember, even though this is a book of Polish, this is a Polish RPG. And even though I am of Polish descent, I was not raised in Poland. So there's a lot of stuff that I had to really research to learn about. And it was just crazy. Like, I was, it blew my mind when I found out how Polish people look at gnomes. Because in No Murdered, right? And remember, I had no idea about this at the time, right? In No Murdered, gnomes are horrifically violent, vicious creatures that just want to brutally kill human beings, right? And they're, of course, they in the No Murder game, they look like the kind of classic garden gnome types, right? So they look all cutesy poo, but they're terribly violent, which is part of the joke. But the implication is also that like that's not their real appearance, right? And that they're really, there's really something profoundly wrong with the gnomes, right? In Polish folklore, Nomi are these squat, less than half size of a human creatures with terribly pale skin and bones, and that they are so thin that their bones show, and they're basically they look like little gray alien types, right? Except with like sharp teeth. The Nomi's bite causes a magical wasting disease that is like unbelievably difficult to deal with, right? Like no conventional medicine can help. So it's they're brutal. They attack by surprise. They attack at night, and they try to get you infected with the disease. Right? It's just like they're terrible. And like every other, in France, England, Germany, like you think of gnomes as the little cutesy poo garden guys, right? But the Polish knew better, and so did I instinctually. It was like a race. It's like something out of a Lovecraft story, right? It's like race instinct told me that the gnomes are not to be trusted, and there it is. The Poles know the truth, Then we have here, what do we got there? Gwiazdor, who's the Starman, and his lady, and these are like now we're entering the realm of like the weirdo fairies, right? So this is a guy who he has a strange face, his beard apparently made of straw, and he's accompanied by a fairy woman. Her name is Piknapani, the beautiful woman, but she's always covered in a veil. And they are like the creatures of the winter solstice. So, and basically, if you run into them, Gwiazdor will judge you. You know, he has a long rod with what looks like a star on the tip. Those he judges as behaving virtually, he will bless. Those that behaved without virtue, he will smite with his star rod. Then Yedza. Yedza is better known to gamers anyways as Baba Yaga. Okay, so here you get the stats of, you know, a slightly more accurate version of Baba Yaga to actually Slavic folklore, as opposed those specifically Polish in this case. There are a few differences. There's a lot of the same stuff. Like the Russian and the Polish version of Baba Yaga are very close to each other, and you know, it's different, a bit different from your D&D standard for Baba Yaga. Who there's a kind of crone, if I remember correctly. Then you have the Leji, which are another type of giant, 10 feet tall. These guys are like a Fey race, and they have the ability to communicate, and they can also change their form to look like a human, tree, or animal. So sometimes they go off into like the human world, but the thing is, their way of thinking is very alien from the human world, so they will act in really weird ways, or, you know, they won't understand what humans are doing. They're a neutral race, so they're not as dangerous as some other races, though. They still can be a very weird encounter. Then you have the night hag, Noknika, who's a hideous old woman. She can turn into a shadow, and she sneaks into a house and tries to sit on top of sleeping children and drain their blood. There she is. The Planetnik, these guys are great. They're like these fairy Gandalfs or something. But their job, like they're fairy creatures of immense power, right? But their job is actually to like lasso clouds and move them along and cause or stop storms. You know, they're beings of they're like nature spirits. They have these magic cords. They throw them into the air and pull a cloud in or out of an area, so they can bring rain or storm or hail or end those things. And Planectics are very arrogant, right? They're very haughty about all of this, right? And you usually find them in mountains more than anywhere else, but you can find them anywhere that involves the need to move clouds, you know. They have lightning bolts that they carry with them, and they're tough to deal with, but they are also a neutral, like fairy creatures can be neutral, right? You got the Purtok. This is a very weird creature. The Purtok are these hideous little short fairy creatures that live in garbage piles. I think there's a relationship there between that and like the ghoul that you see in the Middle East, because those also in the Preta in India, all of these are found in garbage piles. So it's a danger of, you know, the wastelands, literally, in this case. Satyrs, you'd be thinking, oh, well, those are Greek, right? Yeah, but there are stories of satyrs moved over time into the like areas north of Greek, all the Baltic areas, and then up into the Slavic areas, so that there are stories about satyrs. They're rare in Poland apparently, but there are stories about satyrs in ancient Polish lore. So I thought I should include them. The Sturzak are these short, goblin-like creatures with leathery wings that are not particularly dangerous on their own. Well, one of them can be tough on its own, but the problem is they go around in packs and they just tear people to bits. The classic, well, the troll, the Polish troll, is similar to a lot of types of trolls, so very, very close to kind of the Germanic model of the troll, right? They can move through stone, they live inside of mountains, though sometimes they might live in rocks or under bridges or something. They're stupid. They're immune to non-magical weapons. They come back to life if they are slain. But sunlight kills them, right? So they only do things at night. It's pretty similar to the Western version. The Vila is basically your elf maiden, but like it's the elf maiden in the form of a gorgeous teenage girl, basically, and they sometimes ride on giant stags. They're not always evil. On the contrary, Vila will often go and try to make friends with young human girls that appear to be like the Vila's apparent age, you know, they will use those girls sometimes as agents for some of the other things they're interested in doing. But Vila are like the spoiled valley girls or something, right? Like they're emotional, frivolous. They easily become angered. They also easily become obsessed. It's basically like a super hormonal 16-year-old girl in the form of a fairy with the power to cause terrible things to happen, right? Because they can fall in love with boys or men. They can end up kidnapping people and taking them away. The girls that associate with them, like that join her friend group, as it were, are gradually like drained away of freedom of will and eventually of life force. They are generally very dangerous, right? They can cause all kinds of crazy trouble. Then you have the Wologor. He is the spirit of a specific mountain in Silesia. It's the Wolovagora Ox Mountain, and he's a guy with an ox head. What more to say? Fantastical creatures. You got here the Alkanost, which is a bird with the head of a woman. And their song makes people... It's sort of like a siren, except the song of the Alkanost means that you forget everything. You have a complete amnesia, that you have no idea of who you are, what your knowledge or abilities are. Very dangerous. Of course, not as dangerous as the Basilisk, which is a snake with the head and wings of a cock and the feet of a cock. If it looks at you, you have to do a saving throw or you drop dead. If it bites you, you have to do a saving throw or you drop dead. Basilisks are dangerous. Black dogs, that's your like classic evil ghost dog. Chaos slime, I just always add that in there if you want some kind of weird gooey monster. Gadzin. Gadzin is a very large fairy snake. The griffin. Griffins are pretty close to typical, similarly with hippogriffs. Both of those are probably borrowed elements from Germanic culture, I would guess. I don't know. Then there's like some weird stuff like the Rarog. This is a tiny little red bird. It's only a couple of inches tall, and it's a magical bird. And if you hold it in your hand, if you hold it in your hands and you're suffering from melancholy or depression, you will instantly be cured of it. Strix. That's basically a version of the Sturges. Unicorn. The Lindworm is a type of proto-dragon, so it's the Polish wyvern, I guess. Although actually the Lindworm is borrowed also from the Norse, I think. The Zartak. I did a whole Pundit Files issue about this, an adventure called The Great Firebird Hunt. So if you want to know more about the Zartak, check out that adventure. It's a really good adventure. It's very easy to convert into any other type of RPG setting. Like there's not a lot about it that's going to be like really heavily Polish or even heavily Christian. And it has to do with a wild hunt for this bird, this incredible magical firebird that has everybody going nuts. So yeah, check that out. It's one out of many of the Pundit Files that you can find at the Red Room store. The latest one is, what's it called? It's the more martial art techniques, more Dynasty martial art techniques, I think. It's number 22. And that's an expansion to number 3, which is the Song Martial Artist class for Sword and Caravan. You can get any of them. They all cost $3.50. If you can get $3.50 from someone, then you can buy an issue of the Pundit Files. Check them out in the link in the description of this video. Dwarves are pretty standard for the most part. They're found in very deep caves. They were one of the earlier races of the world before the humans. Basically, they're like the implications that they were the first mortal race. Then they displeased the gods some way, so he exterminated them from the surface, and the survivors had to live in caves. There you go. They're not evil, but they're ill-tempered and highly distrustful. They're obsessed with their treasures. But they can sometimes be okay. They can help people sometimes. Fishmen, that's mostly from the coastal areas. Forest giant, the Vedi, another type of giant. As you can see, there are different classes of giant that you are likely to find here. The mountain giant, The Licho. The Licho is a really weird creature. It's short. It's short, dressed in black, has only one eye, but not in the center of the forehead like a Cyclops would. It just has only one side of its face has an eye. And they create misfortune for people. But they can also give you a gift. But the gift might be cursed. It's like the Froyo guy from The Simpsons, you know? So you have to look out about that. Then we have the Vistula Mermaid. This is really interesting. There's a mermaid in the area near Brodno, which is where later Warsaw is built. And this mermaid swims up and down the Vistula. And she becomes quite legendary. Like, there's a statue of her in Warsaw now, I think. And she was apparently a horrifically vicious man killer. You know, like, she was beautiful, but she's really dangerous, you know? So, and she's like more powerful than your average mermaid. So if you're going around the upper Vistula, you really have to look out. The northern area of the Vistula. Werewolves. There's some elements of werewolf lore, again, probably imported. So I brought that in there. The Zmora. This is a shapeshifter that is a woman that has been wronged. And she transforms herself into like a cat-like creature at night and then drinks blood. Another blood-drinking, angry woman. Then I put in the humans, golems, and homunculi there just in case. Then we have like undead. This is actually an undead. It's Zivozona, who is it means the strange wife, and she is an undead who was an unwanted woman in her own life, an old maid basically, or an unwed mother, or a pregnant girl who was murdered, and when she becomes undead, she will then basically go and steal someone's child and replace it with a changeling, which is really interesting because, like, you know, that's what fairies do in Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, it's an undead creature that does it, right? Because it wants to become a mother to the baby, and the changeling in this case is not a fairy but a demon. So women in the Carpathians are terrified and take many protections against her. Your standard ghosts. Latavske, these are the spirits of undead children who died in the womb, were stillborn, or died in early days of infancy before they could be religiously blessed, baptized, or greeted in the pagan form or whatever. In the night, they have the form of a raven with the face of a human baby. So that's why polls are against abortion, I guess. The Phantom Warrior. We have here the undead spirits of great warriors. That's a very classic one throughout many European cultures. The Poludnika, the noon wraith. This is a really interesting one because she only shows up in the day. Like most, undead are, a lot of undead are damaged by sunlight, but not this one. This one only appears around noon, and it's the form of a woman. Well, a lot of times it's invisible. A lot of times it takes the form of like just a whirlwind in the warm air. But she attacks. She's the ghost of a young woman who was betrothed but died before she could be wed. So she attacks men and boys, and it's very unusual that she'll attack women or girls, except maybe sometimes women who themselves have been adulteresses, or women who were nuns or priestesses and broke their vows. So she looks like a young woman in wedding clothes, and she has all kinds of terrible powers that she can do to you. So, this is, I think, a moral story to say that this is why you should stay out of the field around noon, and go eat. Don't get crazy during lunch hour. The Rusalka are female water spirits. They're one of the many drowning spirits that you see in the Polish lore. In this case, they look, even though they're undead, they look like beautiful women, right? They look absolutely like gorgeous young girls, and that's because the way that they were created was from the death of a young girl. They can attempt to charm men into coming to water with them, and then they'll drag them into the water and then tickle them to death until they drown. The Rusalka can also be created by powerful pagan magicians. Shades, skeletons, the Upiers, these are the vampires of the original ancestor of the vampires, so to say, the Carpathian Mountains. They're They have many similarities to the vampire, but a few important differences. The Utopiec, this is another drowner. This is the drowning zombie, basically. Whites, wraiths, The Walking Dead, and I think that's about it. All right, so we got there. We did it in 30 minutes. That's an overview of the monsters you can find in Baptism of Fire. If you like this video, please share it. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and be sure to check out Baptism of Fire. It is one of the most successful OSR RPGs of the year. It had 8.5 weeks and first place in the OSR bestseller table in DriveThruRPG. It was #1 in the overall ranking in DriveThruRPG for several days. It has been a really good seller, and everybody who's bought it has liked it. You can pick it up in the slightly cheaper softcover, which, as you can see, still has like excellent quality, or the hardcover if you want a more bookshelf-ready book or something. Depends. I always use this one in play, and I have this one on the shelf, but there you go. And check out all my other products, stuff like Sword and Caravan and its supplements like Wilderlands. If you have Sword and Caravan, you'll want to get Wilderlands if you're ever going to play Sword and Caravan, because this tells you the tables, the encounter tables when you're off-road, right? And among other things. The Old School Companion 2, this is if you're looking for some medieval authentic adventures. These are 26 adventures that you can use that are all based on real lore and folklore and so on of the Middle Ages, and stories and even some songs. And check out all my other products, including, of course, the Pundit Files, which I already mentioned. You can get any issue of the Pundit Files for about $3.50. Okay, so if you can get someone to give you $3.50, check it out. It's only at the Red Room store. All right, that's going to be everything for today. Currently smoking. This is a Lorenzetti egg plus Argento roots. And we will see you later.